taking our a move through the Bible and moving along quite quickly. We're in the 9th lesson of the first series of this. We're talking today about Joseph and his brothers. So far we've covered most of the fathers of the Jews, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and today we're going to look at Jacob's son Joseph, and also we're going to look quite a bit about Jesus, I think, as you will see. Now I got to tell you folks, I have studied this for this lesson and presented it at another congregation, and I did not know some things that I'm going to share with you today. As a matter of fact, the whole nature of this lesson twisted from what it was when I presented it before to what it is today. I found something amazing that I think you'll find amazing too. It's something I'd never heard before and that you're going to hear today. I love it when I can bring new kind of stuff to people. Now, when it's all over with, I'm sure some of you are going to tell me, oh, I knew all of that stuff. But just hang on. Anyway, for me, I was excited about it because it was so new. What does the word penultimate mean? Do you think it would mean like first place or beyond first place even? Penultimate, I mean the most ultimate place and position, right? What does it mean? Lower than that? What does it mean? Not last.
In the Greek language,
oh boy.
Pene,
Pene.
and you have the pino,
Uh-huh.
and you have the antipino,
Uh-huh.
and you have, I think it's called the other.
Okay, so what is it represented? What would we call the place today? If you were running a race and you came in the penultimate position, what would that be?
That would be the first.
The first position? Okay, well, unfortunately, Charles, I hate to correct you on this, but the word means next to last. You come in, oh, did you say it?
I said second to last.
Ah, wonderful. All right, you're a smart guy. You don't look it, but man, I'll tell you. I'm impressed. Oh, okay. All right. All right. Okay. Peanut, anti-peanut would be the second, then? Would that, in sense?
That word originates with the Greek language.
Okay.
It's an accent marking for the word.
Right, I looked up the Greek word, and the word is pene, I think it's pronounced pane, and that means almost. And ultimate means the greatest. So almost the greatest means next to last. Anyway, who in the Bible was penultimate? And that would be Jacob's child, right? Now, he had many of them. If you notice down here at the bottom are the string of children of Jacob's family. These are shown, right? Yeah. So which one would have been next to last? Joseph. Now, you would think Joseph would have been the first, right? Because if you think about Jacob, the next person you think about is Joseph, but he wasn't. He came way late in Jacob's life. He was next to last, but he was really loved because he was the first child of Rachel. And Rachel had waited through all of those other births, and finally Jacob was born. And so he was delighted for his penultimate son. And he didn't even speak Greek, I don't think. So yes, that would be Joseph. Benjamin was the last child. Now, his mother had a very hard labor with Benjamin, and in fact, she died. She wanted to name him Ben-Oni, which means problem child, which I wanted to name my children that, but Jenny did not want me to. Jacob, though, named him Benjamin, and that means child of promise. Well, Jacob's penultimate child was Joseph, and these are the things that make him penultimate. He was 91. His father was 91 when he was born. Now, I have a 91-year-old mother-in-law. I cannot imagine her having a baby at 91. I just can't. But he was strong and at 91 able and very capable. Joseph means the Lord increases. And he was born in Haran before the family departed from there and came down to live in Canaan. He would have probably been about 6 years old when he met his uncle Esau. So that would be how old Joseph was. Now, we know Joseph was tending sheep, right? Everybody thinks about Joseph and they think, oh yeah, he was a sheep herder. He tended sheep. He was 17 when he was tending the flocks with his 10 brothers. And on the way home, when he got home, he came to Dad and said, "Dad, I got to tell you what these sons of yours did," and it gave them a bad report. The King James Version calls it an evil report. So you can just imagine what kind of things were going on there. Based on the events that follow that, it's not hard to imagine how evil they could have been. And of course, the brothers hated him because of his evil report. Jacob obviously was favored by Joseph. He was the firstborn of Rachel, and there was strong sibling rivalry in that family. We had 2 daughters, and there was a little bit of that, but not a whole lot. I had 4 sisters. There was a whole lot of sibling rivalry in my family. His brothers, though, would not even find a way to speak a kind word to Joseph after he made that report to his dad. So why did Jacob love Joseph more? And there are probably a lot of reasons. Because he was born late in his life, had all these other children, had a whole slew of them, and none of them really satisfied him like this last child was going to. He was Rachel's only son all of her life. She died. He could see Rachel probably in Joseph. And Joseph was the one that would fulfill the promise that God made to him about being a blessed nation. I think Jacob understood that he was the one God picked to do that, carry on. So Jacob made him, I didn't realize he was a dress designer, but he made the guy an ornate robe. Now, most robes of the day were short. They really were about knee length, because they didn't need all that stuff getting in the way of the feet and the movements and so forth when they were out working. But the one that Jacob made for him was down to his ankles. I mean, it was not only beautiful in color, but it was also beautiful in design, and it was so different. Probably very ostentatious. Probably like the robes that someone royal would wear. And here's what my daddy made for me. Sounds like a country music and western song, doesn't it? In fact, Dolly Parton didn't have a robe of many colors. She had a dress of many colors that was made from the patches of the material that her mother had collected. But there have been many ways to try to depict this over the years, and these are just a few of them. Donny Osmond actually is up there, and he was wearing the robe of Joseph in a musical, I think, that he made. Were you there? You were there, so what did it look like?
I think it's important to the story because it has to do with Joseph's relationship with his brothers, that Joseph was not a shepherd. He did not go to the field. He did not tend sheep. His father kept him at home. And his father said, "Joseph, go and see how your brothers do." It was like Joseph is overseeing his brothers because of his
When his dad sent him out there.
because of his father's partiality, that
Yeah.
is the hate of the brothers.
Well, you can just imagine. It was definitely a family that you would not want to be close to, next door neighbors to anyway.
Jacob has this promise from God
Mm-hmm.
that he's going to do these great things.
Mhm.
He has these sons that are such, they're violent men. You know, they kill and they do some really hard things with diamonds.
With Dinah, yeah.
And he doesn't see them either. You know, he doesn't see them. Someone to bring back his promise. Joseph apparently has a kindness about him that he sees something.
Mhm.
I think that may be why.
Yeah.
That last point you had.
Okay. So how did the brothers react then when they saw him? Clearly, they would say things like, "I hate you more than bacon," and "you look like a pig in a colored tote sack." You know, I could just picture the things that they would say to him. "Come here, I'm going to roll you in this mud puddle," and all of that. So they did not like him at all. That's the way they treated him, because he had been treated differently by Jacob and Rachel. So they hated him and spoke unkindly to him and about him. So at 17, Joseph had 2 dreams, right? You've probably told your children or grandchildren this story, you know, about the dreams that Jacob had. And later he came back and for whatever reason decided it was a good thing for me to go tell my brothers about these dreams, right? Because when you think about the dreams, you think, why in the world would he go and start a nuclear war with those brothers? And he did it anyway. That's what he did. This was his first dream. He saw sheaths of wheat in a field. And all of them represented one of the brothers and the father and the mother. They're there out in the field, and everybody was bowing down to him. Maybe the mother's not there. At least the father and the brothers are there. And all of those other sheaves bowed down to his sheath standing in the middle. His brothers were obviously angry at this dream because obviously they understood what it meant. The second dream was like it. He saw planets and stars that also bowed down to Joseph, who was in the middle of all of it. Now this one was weird because in the first one, it just says he told his brothers it, but this one he saw fit to tell his brothers and his dad. Well, that made his daddy mad. His dad said, "Are you expect all of us, including me and your mom, to bow down to you?" Clearly, the guy wasn't thinking straight, right? He could have kept some things to himself and probably, well, he had to, I suppose, tell them. Well, Jacob kept the dreams in his heart, even though it says he reacted the way he did. He still kept those dreams in his heart, thinking about his son and what's going to happen down the road for his family after he's gone. So what promise had been given to Jacob at Bethel that he should have seen being fulfilled in Joseph's dream? Remember Bethel when he laid his head on the soft rock and slept the whole night long? He saw the angels coming and going. What did God promise him? You'll be the father of a great nation. Yeah. How in the world is it going to happen? The only way it could happen is if one of his sons, took leadership. Surely he should have seen that this is what God promised me back at Bethel. But apparently he didn't see that, or if it did, the Bible doesn't make mention of it. So the brothers saw Joseph coming out to them, as you mentioned, and first they thought, let's go kill this guy. Let's get rid of him. He's nothing but trouble for us. We'll throw his body in a cistern and we'll blame a wild beast. But Reuben suggested they not kill him. Reuben said, no, let's save him and we'll not kill him, but put him in the cistern and we'll just go home and tell Dad he's been killed. He was thinking maybe I can sneak back and get Joseph and bring him back home later. But they threw him in a dry cistern. They didn't kill him. And then they see a caravan of Midianites coming. Of course, they sell him for a few amounts of shekel. 20 shekels of silver would have been a good amount for them to get for him. And with silver at $25 an ounce, that was about $200. That was about all they got from selling their brother to these people, to these merchants that came by. But they took his robe and dipped it in the blood of a goat and showed it to his father. Now, when Jacob saw it, he was disconsolate. There's no way you could satisfy him at all. He assumed the worst. He said, a pack of animals must have killed my son Jacob. And he cried. And they didn't even have to tell him that a pack of animals did that. They didn't have to lie at all. They just brought it back. Well, they lied when they dipped his coat in blood, or his robe in blood, and brought it back. But Jacob assumed that he had been killed by a wild animal. Jacob was extremely distraught, as you imagine he would be. He wrapped himself in sackcloth. I know what a tote sack is. I felt a tote sack. I know how rough that thing can be. And these guys would go get that and put it all around them, and they would wear it, and it was scratchy, and it was itchy, it was uncomfortable. You couldn't find any peace in that. It wasn't nice silk and cotton because it just really scratched. And that's what he did. He wrapped himself in sackcloth. Then he poured ashes on himself to make him look really pitiful, I suppose. And he vowed that he would mourn for his son all of the rest of the days of his life. Well, the caravan of Midianites traveled with Joseph on to Egypt. There they sold him to Potiphar, which it was very fortunate for him that he got to work in the household of Potiphar. Potiphar was pretty high up in the ranks of all of the people in Egypt at that time. A good turn of events for him. Now, the rest of this lesson might be a bit tedious. There aren't many images, just some questions and answers, okay? So get ready for that. This is what surprised me. If you compare Joseph with Jesus, you find so many similarities that I never really thought about, I never really knew were out there. And these similarities were just amazing to me. Did you know that all of the characters in the Bible, Joseph is the one who perhaps has the most similarity to the man Jesus? And some even look at this and say that Joseph may have been a type of Jesus. He was the forerunner, if you will, of the kind of man that Jesus would be. And so it's not amazing that these things are there, but I have never really realized how similar they were. So here are a whole lot of things that the Bible's going to tell us that would compare Jesus and Joseph. In Genesis chapter 37, verses 3, compared with Matthew 3:17, the similarity that's mentioned in those two verses are this: they both were firstborn of their father. The next verses, 37:2, and Hebrews 2 tells us that of course Joseph was the penultimate child of Jacob. And if you recall, this is next to the last child. Jesus was one of a handful of children. The Bible mentions 4 of them by names, but there may have been others. Joseph, Simon, Jude. It also mentions him having sisters, if you didn't know that. And many of them, but both of them had many children. So what does Genesis 37:4 and John 15 tell us about Joseph? Well, it tells us that the brothers didn't believe him. There's a statement in the Bible about the brothers who feel like Jesus has gone off the loose end, if you will. He's gotten crazy in his head. Let's go get him and bring him back before he gets us and himself in trouble. So the brothers didn't believe either one of them. How about this? The brothers never accepted his right to rule. Maybe one of Jesus' brothers did, but the rest kind of didn't. They didn't really believe in Jesus at all. For the most part, neither did the brothers of Joseph. Again, the verses in Genesis and Matthew, if you compare them, it tells them brothers conspired against him. And conspiring against Jesus, the brothers said, "Shall we go get him and bring him home?" They realized that they needed to go get him. Both were sold for silver pieces. Now, I didn't know that, but both of them really were. If you think about it, that's what the price was paid for Jesus to Judas, paid in silver. And also then we're talking about Joseph being bought with silver, shekels of silver. They were both stripped of their garments, weren't they? Jesus' garment was taken off him, and just as Joseph's robe was. They were tempted, but the Bible doesn't say a single word about Joseph committing any sin. It's very silent about Joseph in terms of anything that he did. I can't say he was without sin, because who of us are without sin? But, the Bible is completely silent about his sin, and we know that Jesus was completely sinless. And we do know that Joseph was very tempted by Potiphar's wife, right? And even in that temptation, he didn't sin. So they both had been tempted, but they did not sin. And they were both thrown down into a pit. Here's some many other similarities, and this is just slide after slide of similarities. If any of this strikes you interesting, you want to talk about it, please interrupt me and we will. They both were firstborn. They both were shepherds of a sort. At least I would have said he was a shepherd, but apparently he didn't. He wasn't a shepherd, but he was from a shepherd family. Thank you very much, Charles, for I'll take this one off the next time I show it, okay? They both were prophesied to be rulers, and both of the brothers were jealous of them and didn't believe them. I thought about this, and I've got quite a few more of these to go. If I had only known this, I had a Jewish friend. I really did have a Jewish friend. We talked quite a bit about why he would never accept Jesus. I wish I could have sat down with him and said, "Remember Joseph in your lineage, who you want to talk about all the time? Let me talk about Jesus and tell you that they had a lot of things that were in common." I could have had something to talk to him about if I only knew that when I was a teenager. Unfortunately, the Lord only blessed me with this knowledge this past week. So here you go. Here's another slide. Both were rulers. Joseph was ruler of the tribes of Israel. Jesus was the world leader. Both were sent by their fathers to go out to their brothers. One was sent to his family brothers. The other was sent to his brothers, the Israelites, of course. Both had their robes stripped off of them, and both had their robes dipped in blood. How about this? Both of them were sold to a man with the same name. Think about that. Judas, who betrayed Jesus, in Greek in Hebrew would be Judah. Judas was Judah, just like Judah was the one who sold, if you will, his brother Joseph into slavery. Both were put to death by their own people to get them out of the way. I mean, his own family really kind of put him to death, if you will, just to get him out of their way. And Joseph's brothers also, at the time of Jesus, would have done the same. Reuben wanted to rescue Joseph, and Pilate wanted to rescue Jesus. Think about that. Reuben is the one that wanted to go rescue him, and Pilate was the one who wanted to let Jesus go, but was talked into keeping him and going ahead and sending him to the cross. How about Joseph was sold as a slave to Egypt? Jesus was betrayed for the price of a slave. Both of them went down to Egypt. Both were made slaves. Jesus says of himself that he became a slave. Both were falsely accused. Both were punished. Yahweh was with both of them considerably, and both of them were with two others condemned to die. Think of the story. Where was Joseph? He was in prison for a little while. And when he was in prison, he met another man who was there condemned to die. And they were condemned to die. That's kind of an interesting comparison there. Both of them declared what it was needed to save life. Joseph knew exactly what was needed to save life. He said, we need to get this grain and we need to put it in warehouses and store it up, and let's get it to the people then when they need it, kind of like government relief, if you will. And Jesus also talked to quite a bit about what it takes to save life, and it has nothing to do with grain and storehouses and so forth. God's Spirit dwelt in both of them, and Joseph was exalted out of slavery and became a ruler. What about Jesus? He was exalted too and became the ruler of the world. All knees bowed to Joseph. When Joseph was walking down the street, everybody had to get down on their knees and bow to him. That's because how high-ranking an official he was. And the same thing is true when we see Jesus. We're going to get on our knees and bow. And people did. The similarities to me, there's just so many of them. I'm not giving you all of them. I'm giving you a handful of them because there are many others that you could really find if you look at this story. Both men were given a name that meant Savior. In Genesis 41:45, he was the sustainer of life. He was the Savior of the world. That's Joseph. Matthew was given the name, in Matthew, Jesus was given the name Yahweh. That's another way of saying salvation. Salvation comes through Jesus. Both of them had the name Savior. Both were given a Gentile bride by the king. The Gentile bride that Christ got, I think, is you and me. And Joseph, of course, was given a Gentile bride. Troubled times come during their rule. Both of them ruled for a while. And it mentions 7 years of tribulation for both of them. The king of Egypt anointed Joseph to be the sole source of life for everyone. Joseph was appointed by Pharaoh to be the sole source of life. That's the way he described it. Of course, for all the grain that he was bringing in and giving to the people, God appointed Jesus to be our sole source of life. Whew, I got about 10 more of these to go, so bear with me. I just find the similarities amazing, and it really struck me hard. Both were 30 years old when they started their work. One for Pharaoh, and of course one in his ministry. They were both 30 years old. Joseph's brothers didn't recognize him. Jesus' own brothers didn't recognize him either as being who he really was. Joseph was trouble for his brothers, wasn't he? Well, Jesus was in a way trouble for his brothers as well. And Joseph revealed to his brothers at their second coming. In other words, the first time he met Joseph, he didn't tell him who he was, did he? He waited until the second coming of everybody to tell him who he was. Jesus is doing the same thing for us, really. We won't know him until the second coming. Israel certainly won't recognize that until the second coming, will they? Both offer forgiveness to people who sought to destroy them. Think about Joseph. He could have really brought trouble for them, but he didn't. He got in there and supported them and started working with those people that he was with in Egypt. Jesus also could have destroyed the people who were trying to put him on a cross, but he didn't. God used the evil of their brothers to save them. And in Genesis 45, it says, therefore they are forgiven. Well, God uses the evil of everyone out there to save us. We understand what we need to do to avoid that damnation that's going to happen in the same way that Joseph brought that as well. Joseph's brothers shared Pharaoh's favor because of Joseph, not themselves. Pharaoh got the favor of Joseph simply because Joseph was who he was. Didn't get the favor of Pharaoh because of his brothers. We have God's favor not because we are worthy in any way of being Jesus' brother, but we are. And Jesus gives us that. We're unworthy just as Joseph was. Here's one. Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, came through his Gentile wife and are given full tribe status. Gentiles who believe are considered full members of God's people. Thank you, because I'm not Jewish in my background. I'm Gentile. And while only Jesus was truly sinless, Joseph is one of the few people that the Bible basically doesn't say anything at all about whether he was good or evil. It doesn't say anything really bad about him. None of his sins are mentioned at all. And again, we've already talked about how both are called Savior. Okay, so enough of the similarities. I got to tell you, folks, when I read this, it really kind of gave me goosebumps because I finally understood some things I never really understood about Joseph and how significant he was in the Bible. So it was a very good lesson for me as I went through it to get ready for this class today. So enough with all the similarities. Here are a few questions about that I'll have for you. Now, this is an open time where you all can contribute, okay? It's not just a complete lecture class like I told you last week. You can talk if you want to. What does this story show about polygamy? What are some of the negatives that you can see today in polygamy? There used to be a show on TV, I can't think of the name of it, but it was about a man who had many wives and how he put them up in different houses and stuff. One thing I noticed was, I don't know what the guy did for a living, but he had to make a lot of money, right? Some cases of those marriages of multiple wives, the wives live in different houses. In this case, the thing I saw on TV, they lived together in the same house, but it must have been a big house to house all of the wives. So that meant big house means lots of money. It's expensive. Polygamy is relatively expensive. You have to have a bigger homes and so forth. It also promotes gender inequality, doesn't it? Right? I mean, there definitely is an attitude that man is here and we women are down here. It promotes gender inequality. And certainly some of the people in the household would be treated differently. There would be tensions in the household because of that. Also, children are not accepted sometimes by the other women. So one of the women has children, and the other women look at those children as being, I don't even want to get to know them.
One thing with like the modern, there's communities where there's polygamy. When you have one man marrying 4 or 5 women, that leaves a lot of young men out in the cold, right? So a lot of them get like banished from their communities, which is terrible. Like their families, there's not enough, and a lot of that becomes very evil and political about men taking multiple wives. But even taking 2 or 3, it's just not how God intended. I mean, the numbers don't work very well.
I have all I need in my one wife, I must say. And I get more than I deserve. What are some of the negatives? Can you think of any kind of a dream that would be better to show what was going to happen in Jacob's family, in Joseph's family? Can you think any dreams better than the 2 dreams we talked about earlier? For the day, thinking about wheat and wheat sheaves was a good one, I think, and also then the stars, right? for that day, it was all that. But can you think of a better? Would you tell it in a different way if you had to come up with a dream that you had the night before? I couldn't think of anything. I thought they were perfect, really. Did the brothers actually tell Jacob his son was killed? I gave that away, didn't I? Did the brothers actually tell Jacob that Joseph had been killed? They didn't have to. In a way they did. They fabricated something that made his father think that he had died. So in a way they did, but they didn't verbally say, your son, our brother, was killed. What are we going to do? He didn't have to. He assumed the worst. Do you feel sorry for Jacob, for his son treating him the same way that he had treated other people in his life? Jacob was known as the trickster. I mean, what happened when he was born? He came out with his hand holding his brother's ankle, and that means he's going to be a trickster all the rest of his life. He's going to be pulling someone's leg the whole time he is alive, and he caused a lot of trouble for his brother. You feel sorry for Jacob finally getting his comeuppance for the way that he treated everybody. I feel sorry for him in some ways. I mean, I can't imagine someone coming and telling me that one of my daughters had died that way. It would be horrible. Almost too much of a punishment, if you will, I think, for anything that he may have done, but I don't know. I felt sorry for him. I would have. Now, can you imagine the Levins selling their own brother to be a slave in a distant land? I had 4 sisters. I hated them, hated all of them equally. I did. I couldn't stand them. I could not stand those girls when we were growing up. Sometimes I loved them, but for the most part, Jenny knows them. I didn't really care for them very much. I had to take care of them. I had to put them to bed at night. Sometimes when they were very young, I had to give them baths. I had to feed them. So I was really the caretaker for I wanted them gone. I did. But I can't imagine me going out and selling any one of them to. Have you ever been really mad at your brothers so much that you thought about doing something like that? Your brothers or sisters? If you came from my family, you'd understand why I would be asking you that question anyway. So is it easy or hard not to play a favorite? And I love this image. I really do. One little girl gets a birthday cake like this, and the others just get a little tiny cake. Is it easy or is it hard not to play favorites in your family? No one's going to admit to it, are they? You won't admit to it. You probably know it in your heart, but you won't admit to it.
You ever notice how many more pictures there are of the first one
Yeah.
than the second?
Yeah. Well, that's true in our case. All right. Has God given you a dream? Has God placed something on your heart in such a way that you might consider it to be a dream that He has for you? Have you ever had a dream, perhaps? I mean, an honest to goodness dream at night about God coming to you and doing something for you? Or has He done it in some other way? But has He come to you in a dream and given you some purpose? Yes.
I think about the nearest thing that I've had to that is really absorbing Psalms 23.
Okay.
That's the perfect summary that the editor, whoever the writer was, gives to a godly life and the way it concludes and the hope that's there.
Good.
So to me, that's very similar. It's not exactly what you're asking.
I am. Yeah.
It's close.
So we did receive it in Psalms 23, if you think about it. Wonderful. Well, the last slide, and then I'll let you go. What are you going to do with this information? Like I told you, I wish I had it in high school when I was with Ken Applebaum. I could have said, Ken, Ken, look at Jesus from the idea that he was a Jew. And look at the similarities between him and your favorite character of all people in the Bible of Jews in your past, Joseph. Just compare these between the two. It might have put us on better footing for being able to talk about Jesus, right? That may be something you can consider if you've ever talking to a Jewish friend, of course, about your beliefs and why you believe what you believe. One of my most well-remembered teachers at West Helena, Jenny knew her very well, Miss Miller. She was also a Jewish lady. She was as mean as she could be, and I bought her car. I would have been glad to just sit with her someday and say, can we just talk about Joseph, who was a Jew, and Jesus, who also was a Jew, and let's talk about that. Probably could have felt comfortable talking to either one of them really about that. Any questions or comments or snotty remarks?